Hello, every pony. Scar89 here once again with another fanfiction reading. I would like to apologize for being gone for a while. It's that my computer it was acting all crazy and stuff. Um, so yeah, I had to reformat the entire system, and I lost everything. I had three other stories recorded that I didn't upload, and including more chapters of My Little Caboose, and that was over an hour, very long reading, and it's just gone now. And two other stories, I can't even remember what they were. Oh boy. But I've been watching a lot of Psych this week, so I decided why not continue the Psych crossover thing, because I haven't done that for about a month or so. So yeah, without further ado, Chapter 5 of Magic and Mayhem and Murder. Oh my. Chapter 5. In Shawn We Trust. Day 3. Approximately 2:30 a.m. Trade District. Why does this always happen? Feet and hooves pounded down seemingly endless wooden hallways, followed closely by the thumping, shuffling gait of something very large and very angry. The white unicorn in the lead turned a sharp left around a sudden corner, while the screaming human behind her nearly tripped trying to follow. Shawn stopped and stared at the empty hallway before him. A dead end. No rarity in sight. Out of nowhere, something furry and soft wrapped itself around his neck, dragging him into a small bedroom. Ah! The girly scream was cut off by a white hoof, as Rarity frantically pulled Shawn towards the window on the other side of the bed. The two hunkered down, Rarity's hoof still firmly planted over his mouth. Shawn, I'm going to let go now, darling. Oh, sorry. Shawn, I'm going to let go now, darling, but you have to promise not to scream anymore, she whispered. Shawn slowly nodded his head, letting out a shaky sigh as Rarity got back on all fours. Everything was quiet, giving him hope that their pursuer had passed them by. Speaking of which, what the hell was that thing? It looked like someone crossed a pit bull with a gorilla and raised it on steroids and anger issues. In spite of his panic, Shawn did his level best to keep his voice down. That is a rather apt description, actually, Rarity mused as she nervously peeked over the bed at the closed door. They're called diamond dogs. I'm sure Twilight must have mentioned them to you at some point. That's a diamond dog? Well, what were you expecting, dear? An actual animated diamond puppy? No, I just Shawn paused, then shook his head. I'm sitting in a wooden mansion in the middle of the capital city of a peaceful race of talking technicolored ponies. The rage-fueled violence hurricane that's chasing us doesn't exactly fit the setting. I suppose it doesn't, Rarity laughed. You certainly have a way with descriptions, Mr. Spencer. It's a gift, Shawn responded with a rueful half smile as he got to his feet and tiptoed over to the bed. Ever so carefully he cracked it open the tiniest bit, just enough to get a look at the half hallway outside. I think he's gone, Shawn sighed with relief, before he spotted a large shadow moving slowly from the main hallway. Stifling a yelp, he closed and locked the door behind him before quickly walking back to the bed. Never mind. Rarity shot a worried look in the direction of the door before turning to the window. Flipping the latch, she opened it to a brisk night air and looked around, presumably for some sort of ledge or ladder. It is a pretty fantastic view. Canterlot shone like the night sky. The magical lights that kept the streets well lit reflected on the calm waters of the canal several stories below. Say, how deep do you think that water is? Reddy gave him a strange look before seeming to realize what he was thinking. Absolutely not! The exclamation left her lips a bit louder than uh, either of them were comfortable with. By unspoken agreement, both sat still and simply listened for a minute before resuming the conversation, albeit at a much lower volume. Do you know what they use that water for, Shawn? He shook his head. Well, I do, she continued quietly, and suffice to say that the situation will have to be far more dire before I resort to such a desperate tactic as jumping into it. Rarity, don't be the only unicorn in a Pegasus race. I have been that already. It's just. Wait, really? How did that happen? Shawn, I don't believe this is the appropriate time or venue for this conversation. She glanced at the door, then gave him a pointed look. Okay, fine. Uh, wait, what? Oh, okay. Okay, fine. But we're having story time as soon as we get back. And pancakes. Definitely more of those pancakes Applejack makes. I will be more than pleased to share the story with you. Her half-hearted smile faltered at the thump of approaching footsteps. But first we'll need to find a way down. Shawn racked his brain for ideas, but nothing clever came to mind. Can't you, float us down to the street with your magic or something? I'm not Twilight, darling, she lamented. At most, I might be able to float one of us down. Okay, so float yourself down and I'll jump. Rarity raised a single eyebrow in surprise. Well, I appreciate the chivalrous sentiment. You are deluding yourself if you think I'm going to let you ruin that one-of-a-kind ensemble you're wearing. She paused to look back out the window. Besides, we have no idea how deep the water is. You could end up diving headfirst into a puddle. Huh? Shawn hadn't accounted for that. I totally accounted for that. Rarity, whenever Rarity was going to reply, whatever Rarity was going to reply was cut off when the latch of the door started to rattle violently. Shawn shot her a pleading look and pointed to the window, but Rarity looked conflicted for only a moment before shaking her head. Frantic now, he hunted vainly around the room. Hunted violently around the room before finally grabbing the top sheet of the bed and approaching her. Okay, how about this? We each hold on to two corners and jump. Between your magic and wind resistance, the sheet will act as a parachute and we should be able to make it to the street. Thump! The door shook under a mighty blow, dust swirling as it was blasted from the wooden frame by the impact. Will that work? Rarity asked as she looked back and forth between the flimsy-looking sheet and the increasingly flimsy-looking door. Not a chance in hell. Thump! He'd apologize for ruining the suit later, assuming he wasn't about to do a high dive into a shallow end of the pool. Absolutely. I'm pretty sure I saw this in a cartoon once. The door had developed an alarmingly large crack right down the center. It probably wouldn't withstand too many more hits. Rarity bit her lip, but eventually sequestered, I don't know, letting Shawn tie the corners of the sheet just above her front hooves. He then helped her balance on the ledge before hopping up himself. Thump! Okay, on the three. Ready? Shawn asked. Rarity closed her eyes and nodded, her horn beginning to glow a faint blue. 1. Sorry, but there's no way I'm letting you take the fall for my screw-up. 2. Crash! Shards of wood pelted them as Shawn shoved the white unicorn from the ledge. Rarity squealed, reflectively activating the slowing spell she'd been preparing on herself, while the poorly tied sheet blew away in the wind. Maybe it was the fear or the adrenaline rush that it triggered. Whatever the case, Shawn's eye for detail sprung into overdrive. Even noticing the shape and size of the flying piece of wood that scraped across his forehead as he turned to take one last look at the assailant. God, you're ugly. Then he tipped over. 10 p.m. 4.5 hours earlier. The tinkling and clanging of plates and platters settling on the polished marble floor echoed through the massive chamber. Shawn cringed as the gaze of servants and princesses alike only added to the stifling atmosphere that now permeated the room. The looks themselves varied from simple curiosity to wide-eyed horror. The latter prominently displayed on the face of the grey servant mayor that had been trying to relieve him of his half-finished banana split. More banana splits? I would love some! Shawn yelled at the top of his lungs. The maid stared at him, startled out of her shocked stuttering. Uncertain now, she looked back at the white princess, who smiled reassuringly. It was a brilliant maneuver. Shawn could practically see the gears turning in the little mare's head. Of course she'd misheard. The princess and her guests had been whispering, and there were a lot of other conversations happening at the table. Why, he could have said anything, but not murder. The princess wouldn't smile like that otherwise. At the same volume, Shawn continued, "As I was saying, princess, and then I said, heard her? I don't even know her." He let out a shaky laugh, which was met with confused looks all around. Nevertheless, The maid shook her head and got to cleaning up the mess, which acted as the trigger for the rest of the room to resume normal conversation. Sean sighed and turned back around, the two large, deep purple eyes literally inches from his face. Literally inches from his own. Um, what? I don't even know who this is. I'll just guess. Are you sure about this, Sean Spencer? All traces of humor were gone, replaced with a powerfully commanding tone that demanded the truth for him. At that moment, Sean didn't have the slightest doubt that the being before him was as wise and ancient as Twilight claimed. He couldn't look away. He couldn't think of lying or softening the truth. He could barely think at all. Yes. The princess held his gaze for a moment more, before sighing deeply and looking away. I had hoped you were not. Suddenly able to breathe again, Sean studied the ceiling in an effort to avoid any further eye contact. Whatever had just happened, it made him feel uncomfortable. I'm guessing this is Celestia. You must understand. My little ponies are an inherently peaceful and happy race. War has been unknown to them for nearly 3,000 years. In all that time, no pony has ever been killed in anger. Sean's eyebrows rose at that. Wait, but then how do you even know the word? Celestia hummed, her horn glowing slightly as she brought a cup of tea to her lips. Our neighboring nations are not as peaceful. Stories of a Diamond Dog's tribal feud at the Griffinium Empire's campaign against them are taught in our schools. However, I have exerted much effort and influence over the centuries to ensure that my ponies were not caught up in any of the serious disputes. The princess paused, as another banana split was set in front of Sean by the maid. He flashed her a smile and thanks before she trotted back to the kitchen. Um. Oh. Considering your occupation, I cannot accept that your arrival during these trying times was coincidence. Your eyes are familiar with death. You are haunted by it, but you seek it all the time. She smiled at him sadly. Perhaps it was your fate to come here when you did. Thinking back to the events of the last few days, Sean shrugged. I'm not really big on all that destiny stuff. Whatever the case may be, I am forced to ask you for your assistance in this. A storm is brewing on our horizon. I can sense it, and I cannot take the time away from my preparations to investigate the matter myself. Sean opened his mouth to speak, but she cut him off. Do not answer me now. This is not the kind of thing to be discussed over dessert. We will speak of this afterwards. Sure thing, Your Majesty. Celestia gave him a disappointed look. Okay, I guess we're done with the whole foreboding ancient sun goddess thing then. The foreboding ancient sun goddess, smiled and nodded. Right. Just, okay. Right. Just, next time start glowing or something so I know whenever you activate God mode. His comment was rewarded by a tinkling laugh, though it had only been half joking. Sean's eyes still itched from whatever Celestia's stare had done. Still, there was nothing he could do about it, so he shrugged it off as just another part of the interdimensional experience. Eventually, the dessert was wrapped up, along with all the polite dinner conversations. Celestia called a guard pony over to take down a message and deliver it to Royal Guard HQ, then motioned for Twilight and the rest to follow her and Luna. After a few minutes of walking, they came upon another chamber, this one much more subtle in its majesty. The point here was not to impress a guest with opulence, but rather to convey a sense of comfortable luxury. Plush carpeting covered the floor, and books lined every wall except one, which seemed to be reserved for the coziest-looking fireplace Shawn had ever seen. Not that he'd seen that many fireplaces. The princesses conversed quietly with each other for a minute. Luna glanced over at Shawn with narrowed eyes several times. Gee, I wonder what they're talking about. The sarcastic thought came unbidden. A hoof tapped his leg, and he looked down to find Twilight looking up at him earnestly. Shawn, what's going on? What makes you think I know? She rolled her eyes at him. Oh, come on. Any filly could tell this has something to do with whatever you and the princess talked about during dinner. Huh? Twilight raised an eyebrow at the thoughtful look on his face. You, wait. Oh, you really didn't think we'd notice? Looking around at the rest of the mares there, he could see weary glances and small smiles on every face as they sat next to him. Shawn was ashamed to admit it, but he let himself underestimate just how observant these ponies were, especially after what happened in the alley. Okay, to be fair, I've just kind of been winging it since I got here. Sugar Cube, something tells me you've been winging it since the day you were born. Applejack piped up with a grin, to muted laughter all around. Shawn tried to look insulted, but could only smile at the jab. You ruined me, madam. I'll have you know I always have a plan. I just choose to do things the fun way. The fun way? Twilight put a mock horrified voice. What in Celestia's name could be fun about having no plan? Planning for contingencies is half the fun of... Yeah, okay, Twi. Okay, Twi, we get it. You like to organize stuff. Rainbow Dash cut her off, floating casually over to Shawn, before hitting him with a hard look. What I want to know is what the hey you and the princesses were talking about. This has to do with whatever awful business traumatized poor Twilight back in the alley, doesn't it? Now even Rarity was up in his face. The aforementioned purple pony blanched, but with a deep breath and a gulp, seemed to recover quickly. Look, and what was up with the guard captain getting so angry at you anyway? Rainbow Dash cut him off too, poking his chest with a hoof. Well, it's not... And when did you and the princess get on such friendly terms? Rarity followed up with her own poke to his stomach. I don't really see... Ooh, this is a new game! I want to play too! The number of ponies crowding Shawn increased by one bouncy pink mare, who was now poking him repeatedly in the ribs. To his great misfortune, the first such poke caught Shawn by surprise and elected a squeezing wheeze instead of his planned response. Of course, this only encouraged the mare to poke harder. The end result was that by the time the two princesses finished their private conversation, they turned to find a most unusual scene. An increasingly frustrated Shawn was backing up, trying to cover his ribs from Pinkie Pie's continuous assault without tripping over the cushions that littered the floor. Rarity and Rainbow Dash were following right behind the pink mare, shooting questions at him rapid fire. While Twilight and Applejack looked on in obvious disbelief at how quickly the situation had degenerated into this mess. Fluttershy, for her part, anxiously observed the whole affair from her seat by the fire. We demand you to cease this foolishness at once! The booming voice of the Lunar Princess shook several books from the walls and quite literally shocked Shawn on his ass. The mare retracted immediately, nervously standing at attention in a group while Celestia shot her sister a long-suffering glance. Thank you, sister. Now, every pony, please take a sit. What? Shawn yelled. All he could hear was a high-pitched whine and muffled sounds, and if he'd made the mistake of standing near the speakers at a particularly loud dance club for too long. Oh, as if he'd made them. Okay. Who set off a bomb in here? Oh God, I think my ears are bleeding! He shook his head and got to his feet, only to get yanked on his ass again by Twilight, who had pulled him over by his vest to sit with the rest of the group. What's going on? Are the princesses done? Shawn stopped as his head was engulfed in a bright yellow glow. Warmth spread inward from his ears, and just like that, his hearing returned to normal. He looked over to Celestia, a thank you on his lips, only to see a mildly annoyed frown and a soft glow suffusing her entire form. Right. That's definitely a hint. I will now ask that every pony please refrain from shouting. Celestia's frown became a weary smile at her sister's embarrassed cough. Now, girls, I think I can answer your questions for you. One at a time? When none of the others spoke up, Twilight stepped forward. What is this all about, Princess? Does it have to do with the suicide? In spite of the stutter, Twilight actually managed to maintain her composure as she asked. The rest of the mayors, however, had not had any time to become accustomed to the idea, and her revelation was met with a chorus of gasps and tears, or, in Fluttershy's case, outright fainting. Shawn sat quietly as Celestia and Twilight comforted the rest of the mayors, suddenly uncomfortable with the intimate atmosphere. Nothing quite like a true display of affection between friends to make one feel like an intruder. Death was something everyone dealt with differently. Some, like Lassie, resorted to professionalism. Others, like Gus, ran away screaming. Shawn liked to make jokes. It was pretty much how he dealt with everything that made him uncomfortable, in fact. Huh? Where did that come from? He tried to shake the grim thought off, going back over the crime scene again in his mind. In spite of his confidence in that there had been foul play involved, there were several things that didn't add up about the whole thing. Primarily in the captain's absolute certainty that it had been some sort of suicide. To Shawn, that was a nonsensical conclusion. It would make much more sense for someone to dismiss the event as some sort of tragic accident. Ponies probably tripped all the time, and if someone didn't spot the telltale sorry, and if someone hadn't spot the tall tale that he had, it would be easy to confuse the scene for a careless mishap near a badly built window. After all, somebody had gone to great lengths to make sure that that's what it looked like. All that being said, the captain must know or have something Shawn didn't. Some other piece of evidence that pointed him in that direction, and Shawn needed to know what that was. A witness, maybe? He started to put the scene together in his mind. Whoever did it obviously didn't have any problem getting their hands dirty. If there was a witness, I'm going to need to find him before the perp does. It was a sombering thought. Shawn? He was snapped out of his reverie by a purple hoof waving back and forth in front of his face. I guess they're done hanging it out. Yeah, sorry. Are we all good? Shawn replied and looked around. Twilight bit her lip and nodded, glancing over at the other mayors. They sat in a group next to the princesses. Some, like Fluttershy, still on the verge of tears. Still, the mutual support seemed to have done its job, and they all looked determined to keep going. The princess here told us what you told her. Applejack's face was plastered with an uncharacteristically grim scowl. Out of all of them, Shawn would not have expected the laid-back farm pony to turn out to be the emotional pillar. Is it true? Dash's head ironically hung the lowest of the bunch. That some pony murdered that colt? She gulped him audibly. They all winced at the word, even Pinkie Pie, who was quietly frowning and staring into the fireplace. If anything really brought home how shocking this all must have been to them, that definitely did it for Shawn. He wasn't sure how to respond to that. Chances were that his usual joking manner would be even less welcome in this situation than it was back home. Fortunately, Celestia took the matter off his hands. Twilight Sparkle, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, Applejack, Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie? Celestia nodded to each in turn, waiting for them to meet her eyes before going to the next. Twice in the past I have asked much from all of you. I have always been deeply regretful of being unable to shield you from the dangers you faced for our sake. For every pony's sake? And yet, sorry. I have always been deeply regretful of being unable to shield you from dangers that you face for our sake. For every pony's sake. And yet, twice in the past you have all proven yourself and your friendship to be more than a match for the dangers that threaten our land. She paused, the glow about her horn a little brighter. You are heroes to all ponies. You are the elements of harmony, the last bastion of defense for Equestria. And once again, I must ask you to undertake a dangerous task on my behalf. However, this time you will have a little help. The Sun Princess smiled over at Shawn, who stood up and stuck his hands in his pocket. Shawn, I would like your answer now. Every pony in the room looked at him expectantly, and he smiled. My going rate's about $1,200 a day, but I guess I can work this one pro bono. I've also wanted to work with real-life superheroes anyway. Night was well underway by the time they all arrived at the Royal Guard headquarters. Shawn had to admit, it was a damned impressive building. It straddled one of the many canals that cut through the city, a walled, castle-like structure that stared imposingly over the rest of the skyline. He guessed that the tall tower in the center probably commanded one of the best views in Canterlot, short of the princess's own chambers. As they passed through the main gate, in a fair of thick, crisscrossed iron bars, Shawn couldn't help but admire the simple yet functional theme of the architecture. It was the first building he'd seen so far that wouldn't have seemed entirely out of place in a sword and sorceries type movie. A long double line of white pegasi, gray unicorns, and brown earth ponies, all in shining golden armor, certainly helped set a somber mood to the whole thing. Psst! Hey, Sparks! He whispered. Shawn, please, I'd rather that didn't catch on. Really? I think it's a great superhero name. Think about it. Psych-Man and Sparks, the didactic duo. Didactic? I do kind of like the sound of that. Shawn stopped for a moment, confused at her reaction. Wait, that can't be right. Did I use the right word? Not for the first time, he wished Gus was there to correct him. Right. Anyway, I was going to ask why all the guards look the same. I mean, I don't think I've seen two ponies with the same color scheme, but every Pegasi in armor has a white coat and no mark. You mean cutie mark? I'm not saying that. Twilight rolled her eyes. That's what they're called, Shawn, and the guards are no different from any other pony. They actually come in all colors and from all backgrounds, though they often have special talents that are geared for their work as a guard. It's what attracts them to the job in the first place. Naturally setting into the lecture, she continued, the armor they wear is actually enchanted to make them look like that. It's essentially part of the uniform. I hear it makes it easier to separate the job from their normal lives. Huh? It seemed like a sensible tradition, although he couldn't help making mental comparison to stormtroopers. Before Shawn knew it, they were in the lobby of the main tower he'd been admiring before. In contradiction with the rough-looking exterior, the inside was designed more like the large rooms of the castle, though relatively Spartan. Even as every surface was made of marble and polished to a mirror finish, the only gold in the room was contracted into an enormous shield hanging on the back wall. The massive emblem was engraved with the Sun Princess's cutie mark and the words, Intemperatoria Invictus Solus, which I'm guessing is Latin, because I don't know. No. Noting Shawn's confusion, Twilight piped up. It's ancient equestrian. Roughly translate, it means eternally unconquerable sun. Oh, this person's using so many big words, I don't even know. Ancient equestrian? It just looks like Latin to me. It would. The translation spell I cast on you actively converts other languages, spoken or written, into analogous versions it recognizes from your mind. I developed it myself. Actually, the mages here tell me that my use of the layered arcane matrix model to handle the search and definition process was in spirit Latin it is then. Twilight scowled at him, but her ear was short-lived. Her ire? Her ire? Ire? Really? I don't know what that is. It's IRE. I've never seen that word in my life. I think it was cut off. I don't know. He was probably not the first one to have picked up the habit of cutting off her lectures before they gained any real steam. Besides, he had a very good reason to interpret her. They had finally come to what appeared to be the work area, there, where many ponies, mostly unicorns, would sit in their desk and shuffle paperwork. The whole setup was eerily similar to what he had come to expect from the police station back home, though the space was much more open and well lit, and still marble. Good God, how much marble and gold do these ponies have? At the moment, every pony in the room was lined up in rows near the back wall, with the captain himself and a mare in slightly less ornate armor standing at attention in front. Hey, Captain Jeebus, you're looking enraged as ever. Every jaw in the room dropped, with Twilight herself giving him a look that made him wonder if he had somehow managed to spontaneously grow another head, which also happened to be on fire. The rest of the guard ponies merely looked as if he'd casually pulled the pin on a grenade and was currently balancing it on his nose, except for Celestia, who, he noted, had turned her head and cuffed politely into her hoof. What he does, Shawn muttered defensively. And he really did. If the stiff jaw, grinding teeth, and rigid posture weren't clue enough, the red discoloration showing through his brilliant white fur certainly gave it away. Mr. Spencer, how nice to see you again. The captain's voice was strange in a strangely similar fashion to Princess Luna's, as if he wanted to scream at the top of his lungs, but was restraining himself. Shawn made a mental note to leave whenever the princesses did. Your Majesty, the captain continued, it is an absolute honor to have you here. Can I ask as the purpose of your visit? Did you not receive our message, Captain Agius Fidlius? I still can't pronounce that word. Celestia cocked her head at him. I did, Agius admitted. Agius. I'm just going to call him Agius because I'm from New Mexico, and the closest word I can come up with it is Aggies, which is the NMSU team, and look it up yourself. I had been holding out some hope, however, I had been holding out some hope, however, that is what some sort of error or prank. The death of one of my little ponies is not a subject that I would ever take lightly, Captain. Of course, Your Majesty. Winching at the light rebuke, the captain nodded his head at one of the rooms. Please, follow me. By the way, sorry that I changed his voice. I think this sounds like a better Lassiter voice, because he reminds Shawn of Lassiter, so why not? Shawn followed the others into what appeared to be a conference room with a large oval table taking up most of the space. Having no stool this time, Shawn chose to stand between Twilight and Princess Celestia. A small group of unicorn guards, including the mares in the fancy armor, filled in and stood behind the captain, who sat on the other side of the table from the princess. While the others found their seats, Shawn took a moment to review what he knew. This was going to be a difficult case to make, having had almost no access to any evidence. Still, he should be able to get things rolling, so long as the princess backed him up. Celestia started the meeting with a nod to the captain and his guards. I want to begin by saying that my sister and I cannot begin to express how much we appreciate your many years of service to the throne. We entrust your judgment and intentions absolutely, so we will not force you to pursue this matter any further if you do not deem it necessary after this meeting. And I'm guessing this is Shawn thinking, balls. I don't know why, but he would say that. Anyway, that being said, we have come across some additional information and resources that you might find useful. At this point, the princess graced Shawn with her most beaming smile. Okay. Okay. Well, with all due respect, Your Highness, if you trust my judgment on this matter, as you have in the past, then you must trust me when I say that this case is undeniably closed. The captain's rebuke lacked much of its usual gruffness, though none of its directness. I understand that, Captain. However, it has come to my attention that our visitor has an unintended opportunity to closely inspect the scene of the event. 3 guesses at who submitted that report. She waited for the captain to nod before continuing. It has also come to my attention that back on his world, Shawn is what is called a private detective. As I am given to understand, the equivalent of the royal guard of his nation occasionally hires him to help solve cases they cannot. She paused and looked directly at the captain. You, more than any pony, know that it is impossible to lie while looking me or my sister in the eyes. Shawn looked into her eyes and assured me that. Oh, she's still talking. Shawn looked into my eyes and assured me that what happened to that poor merchant pony was not suicide, but murder. To his credit, the captain did not flinch at the word, though every other guard grew wide-eyed for a moment. These are certainly very permanent facts, Princess, and I understand now why you wish to call this to my attention. He paused, and a corner of his mouth twitched into a frown. However, I must call some things into question. Though we know he believes he is telling the truth, couldn't he simply be wrong? We know nothing of the world he comes from, or how good he actually is at his job there. Tell us, Shawn, have you ever even solved a case before? Wrong question to ask, my friend. Just saying. Twilight's eyes had gotten wide. Obviously, the mare had never even thought to ask these questions and was probably kicking herself for not doing so. The rest of her friends were also giving him dubious looks. You're sharp, Captain. I'll give you that. I'd even give you the point if you weren't about to set me up for the spike. Shawn stayed quiet, giving the stallion only a smug smile and a wink in return. The goad worked, and the captain's look darkened as he continued. Okay. Even bearing all that, our guest here didn't get a look at all the evidence. In fact, I happen to have I'm getting something, Shawn shouted, slamming one hand on the table and bringing the other one to his forehead. Of course he would do this. Every pony in the room, even the princesses, gave him startled looks. Who's saying this? Sorry. Force of habit. Shawn dropped his hand and coughed before continuing. You have a witness. That's right. We have a wit. The captain trailed off, actually genuinely speechless. How the mare behind Aggius choked out. And the gamble pays off. I love it when I'm right. That one was easy. Slowly, Shawn began to pace around the table, all eyes on him. I would have really loved to see Shawn do his psychic thingy and make all the ponies believe that he was psychic, because that would have been so awesome. But he didn't, and now we're gonna miss all the best parts of Psych when he's having his psychic attacks. Anyway, slowly Shawn began to pace around the table, all eyes on him. I got a good look at the scene. The obvious answer, considering what ponies are like, would be that it was an accident. But by the time we got there, the guards had already jumped to the conclusion that it was a suicide, and not the first one. Shawn's mind flashed back to the captain standing in front of the nervous private, then behind Shawn himself. That's the third one this month. Of course not. Of course not. It was a suicide. The only way some pony would think that is if they talked to some pony who saw it happen. The captain nodded grudgingly, a thoughtful look on his face. You're right about the witness, but then what makes you think it was murder? I'm getting to that. First, though, I need to defend my culpability. What? My culpability, credibility, Shawn. I've heard it both ways. He doesn't say it that many times. I don't know. Twilight brought a hoof to her face, though Shawn was honestly surprised that she hadn't seen it coming by now. Anyway, Shawn continued as he walked up to the four standing unicorn guards, rubbing his hands together. This is where I show off a little. Pointing to one after the other, from left to right, Shawn spoke to each guard. Happy birthday! Hope you remembered to feed your dog this morning. Don't worry, newbie. I'm sure you'll do fine here. You should lay off the late-night partying during the week if you don't want to create awkward situation with your boss. All four ponies standing at him stared at him dumbstruck as he continued. Before you ask, no, I'm not psychic. He pointed to the first one, the mare with an elaborate armor. You have a tiny bit of glitter on your hooves, which, along with the small stack of presents that were sitting on the large desk on the floor out there, means that either you're a really popular party animal or you've got something to celebrate. Pointing to the next one, there are long tan-colored There are long tan-colored hairs shed by something about knee-high all over your legs. Since you didn't take the time to brush them off, and you've also been staring at the clock since before we came in here, you probably left in a hurry this morning. If I had to guess, I'd say you're worried and didn't leave enough food out for the dog before you rushed out. And the next. This guy's armor's so polished you could eat off of it. Your steps and stances are all really rigid, which is easy to see when you're standing next to a bunch of veterans that could march in their sleep. And you flinch every time either the captain or Miss Boss over here, he nodded at the mayor again, even look at you. And the last one, the matching glitter on your hooves means you probably went to the same party as Miss Boss over there. The bags beneath your eyes mean you probably didn't get a whole lot of sleep, and for some pony who's standing as far as he possibly can from his boss at all times, you sure do shoot off a lot of uncomfortable looks her way. The pony in question turned beet red through his armor, while Miss Bossmare coughed politely into her hoof. As for the rest of the room, well, they were very quiet. God, I've always wanted to do that. Playing psychic had some advantages, but having to attribute his talent to magical powers wasn't one of them. Whoa! Rainbow Dash finally breathed out, giving the signal for the rest of the ponies to start moving again. Shawn, Twilight spoke up, just how many cases have you solved back on your world? Just under 100, maybe. Although only about 80 or so were actually murders. Yeah, then because there was one about the bank, when Gus went into the bank, and then Shawn became the hostage negotiator person. It was awesome. I like that one. Okay, the room went deathly silent again. Only this time, rather than impressive looks, Shawn caught a lot of horrified glances. And was that pity? He wasn't sure what to think about that. So much death. Surprisingly, it was Luna who spoke out this time. The strain was gone from her voice, replaced by a tiredness that he hadn't heard there before. Oh, Shawn, I'm so sorry. Even Fluttershy's timid voice rang clearly. What? Are they serious? It's not like those were people I knew. That's when it struck him. The core difference in the way these ponies thought from the way he did. For Shawn, and mankind in general, there were only so many people he could possibly bring himself to personally, truly care about. His family, his friends, and maybe some relatively close acquaintances. When he worked a murder, the victim was just that. A victim, a body, evidence, but never a person. These ponies were different. To them, every pony's death was as emotionally jarring as the death of a loved one, because they genuinely cared for life that much. It explained the ludicrously low suicide rate and the non-existent murder rate. It explained their reactions to such a brazen statement as, "I've personally been around 80 different people who suffered violent deaths." He may as well have said his entire town had burnt down around his ears before any pony could actually step forward to hug him. And before any pony could actually step forward to hug him, and Shawn thought some of them might try to do just that, the Sun Princess spoke up. "Well, Captain, I think we've all heard enough for tonight. Should I be given to understand that you will be bringing Shawn and the elements into this investigation?" The captain nodded, slowly, grudgingly, and grimly. But, by God, he nodded. Celestia gave Shawn a sad smile. "We would all very much like to hear the reasons for your conclusion, Mr. Spencer. However, it is very late and the last few hours have proven very stressful for some of us." At that, she looked over at Twilight and her friends. "Tomorrow, you will be given full access to all evidence, including the witness, so you can properly confirm and present your suspicions to us. In the meantime, every pony should try to get some sleep." The order was greeted with nods all around as the guard ponies, along with Luna, stood up and filed out of the room. Before Shawn could follow, he was stopped by a large white wing spreading across his path. I think this is Captain. Okay. "Shawn, any world can seem dark when..." Oh no, that must still be the princess. "Shawn, any world can seem dark when one looks at only one aspect of it. I want you to know that we will not judge it, or you, by what was said here today." Shaking his head, Shawn was about to dismiss the idea when he was pulled into a hug by the same wing that and its counterpart. Soft. That was all he could think for a moment before he was released. "Hey, thanks for the thought, Princess, but it's really not as bad as all that. I actually love my job." Celestia smiled at him and nodded, before motioning to Twilight and her friends, who were waiting patiently by the door. He walked with them in silence, all the way back to the rooms they'd been assigned at the palace. In spite of his best efforts, he somehow ended up on the receiving end of several hugs, which he bore with as much grace as he could. His intention had been to impress, not garner pity, although it did feel nice to be emotionally supported every so often. Where did that come from? It was roughly 2 in the morning when Shawn snuck out of his room. He had found himself lying on a massive 4-poster bed, entirely unable to sleep. The thought that something was running around killing innocent ponies had prevented him from finding rest, and there was no longer any question in his mind about two things. One, whatever was doing it was most certainly not a pony. And two, he was going to have to get the Royal Guard to reopen those other 2 suicide cases. 3 suicides in a month, and one of them turns out to be a murder in disguise. I'll take better than even money. The other 2 turn out. What? I don't know I'm gonna start over. 3 suicides in a month, and one of them turns out to be a murder in disguise. I'll take better than even money. The other 2 turn out the same. So he found himself meandering through the streets of Canterlot, a half-eaten apple in his hand from a helpful night shift maid. It boggled his mind that not a single guard had questioned his sudden desire to go for a nighttime walk through the trade district, though it was difficult to navigate the streets at night, even with directions. Eventually, he came to the very same alley that had temporarily housed the body. Some industrious janitor ponies had spot cleaned this place, which would have horrified Shawn had he not already guessed that ponies didn't have very much in the way of investigating forensics. I don't know. Hopefully, whatever notes they'd taken combined with that witness would give him enough to go on. Well, that was whatever. Well, well, that and whatever else he happened to find tonight. Shawn? He whipped around, nearly choking on his apple, as if the very familiar voice of one very white fashionista unicorn came from directly behind him. What in Celestia's name are you doing all the way out here so late? Rarity stepped forward into the light from one of the street lamps, an accusing tone in her voice. I needed some air? You could have gone to your room's balcony for some air. Try again, dear. I like to walk, and I'm to believe that you ended up at the scene where you claim a murder was committed entirely by accident because you wanted to go out for a walk? Yes? She stared at him, eyes narrowed, until he threw up his hands. Fine. I wanted to take a look inside the building. You mean the one the pony was thrown from? No, the coffee shop across the street. No, the coffee, sorry. No, the coffee shop across the street. He deadpanned. Well, I never! There's no need to be cross, Mr. Spencer. I was merely worried about you. A thought clicked. Wait! How did you end up all the way out here? Reddy paused, coughed, then paused again. I may have followed you. Just a teensy bit. Shawn gave her an arch look before chuckling. Well, we're all the way out here. Would be ashamed to go back without at least taking a look. Darling, that building has been abandoned for years. It's not going anywhere. Is there a reason we can't simply come back in the morning when decent ponies are awake and about? Wait, for years? What the hell was that merchant doing in there then? Language, Mr. Spencer! And I couldn't tell you. Real estate, perhaps. Shaking his head, Shawn tested the nearest door to find it locked. It was the same with every window he tried. Well, it looks like we're... Wait, is this... Oh, well, it looks like we're not getting inside tonight. Why don't we head back, have some relaxing tea, and get a full night's rest? Reddy piped in cheerfully, until she saw Shawn pick up a rock. Oh no, please, don't do what I think you're about to... Smash. Do. Glass tinkled on wooden floors as Shawn used the rock to clear the remaining shards from the frame. Looking around furtively, he hopped through the now empty frame. He hopped through the now empty frame and started exploring the inside of the massive wooden complex. Eventually, Rarity joined him, now angrily muttering with puffed cheeks about hasty, interdimensional monkeys and what the likely punishment was for breaking and entering. If you stop whining and help me find some stairs, we could get out of here sooner, he whispered. Rarity shot him a dirty look, but started checking doors nevertheless. As they made their way deeper and deeper into the mansion in their hunt of the fifth floor, Shawn started to lose track of where they were. There were so many identical hallways with no decorations, and he resorted to sketching marks into the wood every time they made a new turn. He was actually in the process of making one of these marks when he first heard talking. It was not a language he recognized, though he could have sworn it sounded Germanic. Whatever it was guttural and rhythmic, as if the throat that made the noise was designed for growling more than speaking. Shawn motioned for Rarity to be quiet, though the unicorn had stayed miraculously silent through most of the later half of the expedition. He made his way over to a window and looked down. 7th floor. and looked down. Seventh floor. Okay. They were nowhere near the right window, although this might end up being a lucky break regardless. Curiosity overcoming his sense of self-preservation, Sean put his ear to the door and listened. Most of it was unintelligible growls, but there were a few equestrian words thrown in. It sounded like one creature talking to itself. Ack, pony, Celestia, human, die. Sean's eyebrows curled up his forehead. What is it saying? Rarity whispered as she stepped closer. Waving her back, Sean tried to move away from the door as carefully as he could. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. The noise from the room had stopped, though Sean still held out hopes that whatever was in there would just shrug it off as the house settling. The heavy thumps of approaching footsteps disabused him of the notion. Run! Splash! Sean hit the water hard. That piece of wood that nearly lobotomized him had completely messed up his dive, so that he ended up landing back first. Ouch. Like anyone who had landed horizontally in water after a fall of any significant height will tell you, that kind of impact will knock all the fight and air right out of you. So when Sean found himself completely disoriented, blind, and underwater with empty lungs, he rightfully thought that he wasn't going to be coming back up. Interestingly enough, his own death did not worry him as much as the thought that the ponies would be emotionally afflicted with yet another casualty. Though this time, because he had to be stubborn to not get the last word. Suddenly, his world became a vibrant shade of purple as he found himself on his knees, heaving and coughing, freezing water onto cobblestone. Oh, heaving and coughing, freezing water onto cobblestone. Sean, are you all right? Twilight's concerned shout rang in his ears. Hold on, Sugar Cube. I'll get the water out of you. He coughed, then suddenly expelled every bit of water and air left in his lung as a crushing weight pushed him into the ground. With a gasp, he managed to flip himself over. Oh, oh, my... Yellow Hooves inspected him, carefully prodding and poking for any possible broken bones. Is he going to be okay? Don't worry, Rainbow. I think I got him... oh, that's Twilight. Don't worry, Rainbow. I think I got him out in time. You go find a nurse while we keep an eye on him. Got it. I'll be back in 10 seconds flat. A flap of wings and a burst of wind followed. Having managed to start breathing normally again, Sean took the opportunity to open his eyes to find furious glare directly above him. Sean Spencer, how could you? He laughed, then coughed. Sorry, guess I ruined the suit. Tears in his eyes, Rarity poked him in the chest hard. I don't care about the bucking outfit. You lied to me. You could have died and it would have been my fault. You got a funny way of looking at things, do you know that? Sean slowly sat up to see the rest of the ponies, except for Rainbow Dash looking on in concern. What? What exactly happened here? Twilight asked as she stepped up to his other side from Rarity, helping him get to his feet. I'll tell you when we get back. Right now, I only have one thing in mind. Which is... Sean looked around at the ponies and grinned. Who's up for some midnight pancakes? And that is the end of chapter 5, I believe. Was it? Yes, that was the end of chapter 5. That was a very, very good chapter. But very long, because this chapter's gone on for over an hour. An hour and 1 minute and 5 seconds. So, what else? What else? What else? What else? Um, I'm having a brain fart. I don't know why. I guess. Thanks for checking out my video. Go check out Multi Fanfic a Day and Bony Fanfic. Good friends of mine. They do really great readings, better than I do. At least I think they do better than I do. They are really great people. And yeah, check out one of my other videos or whatever. Subscribe and like if you want to. And I guess with that, I guess I will see you guys later.